Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. We are your hosts and hopefully your new bookish pals. I'm Hannah MacDonald.
And I'm Lydia Clare. This is the 4th episode of our Top of Your TBR series, where we ask the people we admire to share 4 of their ultimate reading recommendations.
Today's special guest is the incredibly talented Rosa Rankin-Gee. Rosa is a British writer based in Ramsgate. She's the author of 2 novels and her work has appeared in The Guardian, The New Yorker, Vogue and Harper's Bazaar, just to name a few. Her first novel, The Last Kings of Sark, won Shakespeare & Company's Paris Literary Prize. And her most recent novel, Dreamland, which was published in April 2021, was selected as Evening Standard's best new book. We are so pleased to be chatting with Rosa today. Rosa, welcome to a pair of bookends.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I would clarify on the Evening Standard thing, it was on one of many books rather than the best. I like what you said. That was better. I should answer them and say, look, we're doing a good update.
We weren't sure, but let's go with that was the best new book.
I prefer it.
We will always hype you up. Well, what we like to do before we bombard you for your recommendations is ask the most important question I believe you can ask anyone, and that is, what are you currently reading?
See, the good thing about what you're currently reading is you tend to remember, like all books I've recently read, even if I love them, I forget instantly. Like I know that is a kind of paralysis that many people feel, but people are like, you know, what books do you like? You're like, oh, you remember one that you read when you were like 10. I just finished On Chesil Beach by E.M McEwan, which I'd never read, but my aunt like kind of gave to me like a few years ago and was like, you have to read this. It's always interesting when you get like family recommendations or any kind of personal recommendations, because you're like, why does this person recommend it to me? Like there's always a really interesting, and you have that person in mind as you're reading. So I felt very close to my Aunt Trina as I was reading that book, and I think it's really like, it should be so quiet, because it really is just about this, you know, a young couple, their like first wedding night together, but he's so dexterously like weaves in their backstory, and it's very beautifully done and a great like testament to a moment. So yeah, I just finished that and I'm moved on to Claire Keegan's Small Things Like These, which I feel has been recommended to me by like everyone, like and I'm only just like beginning, and I feel that because it's a short book and I feel like I trust everyone who's told me it's wonderful, I want to kind of take my time with it. Have either of you two read it?
Yeah, I've read it. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I think I read it in one sitting, so I did not take my time. I was like, I need to read it all now. And yeah, it was incredible. I devoured it. It was like this little nugget of beautiful writing.
And I got a message as soon as she'd finished it, like, Hannah, you need to pick this up right now.
I just thrust it in people's hands.
I do. I want, like, right now it feels incredibly, like, it feels dual, like it feels kind of, even though like the sense of time is really present, it feels like it's written outside of time too. Very like lulling and seductively quiet, I think. So I think, when am I going to be bashed around the head? In a way that, it's probably why I'm reading slowly too, because there's enough awful stuff that's going on at the moment. And then another book that I'm also reading, and I've been reading this so slowly, and there's 2 parties because I'm really enjoying it. It's How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia. I love the name Sequoia, wicked name. Sequoia Nagamatsu. And that is my vibe. It was recommended to me by Sapphire, who runs our brilliant local bookshop in Ramsgate.
Oh, Book Bodega.
Shout out to Book Bodega.
I'm so jealous. I've followed them on Instagram and I'm desperate to go.
I mean, we're so lucky here. Margaret Bookshop's amazing. Francesca, I've got like Sapphire here too now. I mean, she recommended it to me and it was just like a knockout. They are interrelated short stories which take place after the permafrost has melted and a disease has kind of emerged, which is basically killing children. And they're all of these short stories that come from really like elliptical angles and these surprising slants. And it's just like, what I love about it, I really love like socially realistic dystopia, hence Dreamland. And it does feel really like nuggety. Like you can feel kind of, even though some of them are very surreal, it feels incredibly rooted to reality. It's got, you know, that like Marianne Moore line about imaginary gardens with real toads in them. Like it's full of real toads that allows you to believe in all of these other horrors. Yeah, but because it's so kind of, each chapter is almost like a short story, I'm metering it out like over time to keep it going.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Like one of those books that you read and you're just like, this is superb writing, like super.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh, I need to get that now.
I know. We've not even started Top of Your TBR yet.
So I know that we have brought you on today to talk about your 4 book recommendations, but before we get into your book recommendations, I think our listeners would drop kick us, and rightly so, if we didn't get to talk to you about your most recent novel, Dreamland, which we both loved, like completely adored. And for any listeners that are yet to read this gorgeous book, Dreamland is a dystopian novel set in the coastal town of Margate in a future which is unsettlingly close to home. Against a backdrop of soaring inequality and creeping political extremism, it's a novel about the power of resilience, hope, and love in a world that's spinning out of control. Rosa, we'd love to know what your writing process was like for Dreamland and what inspired the story.
To use the technical term, it was fucking dreadful. The writing, it really was
Fantastic.
It's like it was. I mean, thank you so much for saying that about the book, and I'm really glad you both read it and liked it. And what's so weird is I'm so proud of it now, and I really am. I wish that I could go back and tell like the version of me that was struggling so much when I was writing it that like it was worth continuing. And I try and talk about this as much as possible because there are so many of these like aphorisms about writing, like, you know, only do it if it's burning to come out of you, and like all of this stuff. And I think that like that can be true for some people, but it is also just like not true for others. It doesn't mean that they like shouldn't write. And I think, I want to be honest about that because so many people struggle. And when I was struggling, I was like, what's professional? Do you stop and you do something else that flows and has all these things and you don't hate yourself every time you sit down with the book? Or is it professional to like persevere? And I'm so glad I did. All that to say, like, that makes it sound like the book's a real hard slog. Hopefully, I think people said that it doesn't. You don't read it being like, wow, she hated herself the whole way through.
No, absolutely not.
How like heavy it is. It's just like, you know, when you're writing a closed future, like there's so much. The book is based on social policies which are currently in action. So it's not like, it really isn't a far-fetched dystopia by any means, but it still requires like a certain amount of like world building. And that's just like, it's hard to do. It's hard to get right. And also with Dreamland, because it's so close to contemporary life and it took nearly 10 years to write, you're constantly like trying to incorporate the world that's happening into the future. So like I started writing it before Brexit, before Trump, like all of these things. And so then you're kind of like, oh God, this is kind of, unfortunately, everything that was happening was aligning with which is awful too. And now like we're heading into a recession, which again is like, I get no pleasure from when real world like confirms. I don't want to be some soothsayer, like quite the opposite. I'd like none of it to come true. But yeah, it was a very, very complicated writing process, but I'm glad I stuck it out. And anyone
stick
it out. Just stick it out.
Yeah, just push through. Definitely.
That'll be great for a lot of writers to hear as well.
Honestly, I was just like cleaning out this apartment that I used to have, and I found so many like old printouts, and they are like hilarious and also really reassuring. Like there's just whole pages where I've written like boring and like all of these, like I've read it multiple times, and one will be like, this is absolute shit, I hate you. And then like me the next day would be like, bath, I agree. All of it. Like it's just completely like this cacophonous. Yeah. And again, I do think for some people writing isn't like that. They kind of write sentence by sentence. But for me, my process sucks. And I hope that it changes. I really hope that's not like a systematic thing.
How many years did it actually take?
Well, I started writing it in November 2013, maybe just afterwards, like December, like very end of 2013. And then it came out in 2021. Probably was finished like early 2020. Theoretically finished, then the pandemic happened and I had to work out how to kind of like bring that in a little bit. But yeah, it's a long time.
Oh, I mean, like you were saying, like so much has happened in that chunk of time, like Trump, like Brexit, like the pandemic, like all these different things. And did you feel like when you were writing it that those things kind of impacted the way that you were writing it? Like, did it shape the novel in any way?
I think, you know, like things happened. It was tricky because I'd have things and then they would happen in real life. Again, not because I'm like some kind of predictor of the future, like absolutely not. They were just kind of things that were bound to happen. But then you have to kind of think like, I don't want this to look exploitative or like I'm just pulling from life. Like, so then you have to kind of, it's like this delicate just dance really to incorporate it or not. Like Alan Kurdi, the kid who was the Syrian kid who was washed up, found on the beach, like it's horrible to, but like the book had already started for a long time with a body washed up on the beach, a child. And you sometimes don't want to change something that you've already had in a book, but then you don't want to, it's difficult. And I hope hope what's in the book that does reflect things that have happened or have happened before, I hope it's done sensitively. Yeah. And it's not, I think, like, I say this all the time, like, we have this idea, for example, fiction of like dystopia being like in the future, and like the definition of dystopia is people experiencing extreme injustice. And that's like, now it's every single point in human history. So like, I think that's what's really important with this book too. Like, it's not about this like distant world that like is kind of, you have to stretch to imagine. Like, it really is already happening now, so much of it.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Also, it sounds so depressing. There's loads of drugs, there's loads of drugs.
Just to start on a light note. No, but what I found the most compelling part of the story for me personally was how well the working classness was portrayed, because as a working class person myself, Hannah is too, that's really hard to get accurate, because we had a conversation the other day, earlier, about shoes in the house and how it's okay to have your shoes in the house because we're working class, so that's fine. Just don't bring in any like trash with you. And like, you know, these little things that, you know, if you're working class, you know, and it chimes with you. And I felt like there was so many moments in Dreamland where that was done so well, and I really thought that was just a highlight for me. How important was it for you to get that right?
It's a really, like, class has been something that is in all my books. I think that it is something that fundamentally defines British, like, I think all writing is political writing, and like class system completely, like, as ridiculous as it is, as like nebulous as it is to people outside of it who don't understand it, it defines so much of how people get everything. So I think it's like, it's just really, really, really important. I also think in the book, one of the things I wanted to do is like break down some of the categories of it. Like, Chance's mum is from a kind of like middle class family. She's kind of fallen, again, all of the metaphors that we even have, like fallen through the slats, like all of this. But I think it's like, I was interested in how class plays out in like the entirety of the book. And there's a Chance, who's the main character, the person that she falls in love with is like, even like visually straight away when she meets her, she's wearing like sun cream, her voice is different, she's from like fundamentally a different class. And I think that like the book is written from a first person narrator, and that's Chance. So that is, readers tend to identify with a first person narrator. But I think so many people who read the book are probably closer to the middle class character who like fundamentally chooses to make decisions, or like, let's not ruin it, but like, will she not make decisions which are in her own best interest or not, and like preserve the like hammock of privilege that she's always had. So I think just I was interested in showing how class affects everyone's life from the moment. The other thing is like, there's such a trope with dystopia of like about middle class people, and like, I love some of these books, but it's like middle class people who lose everything that they had, and so it's this kind of like nostalgia for a previous life. Like that, of course that's an interesting story, like someone losing something that they once had, but I was interested here in like it not being a venerated past. It's like a continuation of an existence that has always been like subjugated by, you know.
I think that's what fascinated me as well, is that it was very much seen as, when things, not to spoil anything, but when things do sort of start to go awry, a lot of the working class mentality is that we can get an opportunity from this. We can get something from this, because I genuinely believe that most working class people are opportunists. We take what we get, we push with what we have. And I think that it's fascinating to see that kind of mentality when you know that the world is going to shit and this is going to be horrific, but it's like there's still kids going, yeah, but I can make something of myself in this world, I can still push towards something else. And and I thought that was so deftly done. I really can't compliment you enough on it.
I think the other thing is with, I'm not talking like me versus the rest of dystopia. Like, I can give you countless recommendations of amazing like dystopian novels I love, but I think a lot of them too are interested in like, well, there can be like true post-apocalypse, and then, you know, everyone's kind of like out for themselves and all that. Like, that doesn't align with my view of what a socially realistic decline looks like either. I think that's a really important thing. Like, it's not because you want to be like, the idea of hope, it's not because you want to be like chirpy, it's because we maintain hope for beyond the point where it's like realistic, basically. And also like, people just like, I think people help each other out. Like they do help each other out. And like community is like, you know, it can be like a word that can be exploited or overused, all of those things. But like, I think the book is, you know, it's a love story, but it really is about family. It really is about like friendship too. And the ties of friendship often like stronger than romantic love too. And I think that that's a really, that's something I like to talk about with this book too. Like it's not hope for it being like kind of uplit or feel good. It's because I do think that that's like, yeah, how things would work out, particularly at that stage of time like that.
Yeah.
I think as well, like the subjective like class divides through the lens of like community is so interesting, especially as we've, you know, we're kind of out of the pandemic now, but you know, going through the first part of the pandemic, you really saw, you know, how apparent class divides are and what communities are kind of looking out for each other and what communities aren't, or, you know, where the community is. And I think, you know, you do that really well in Dreamland, where there was the sense of some people were just out for themselves and some people were, you know, looking after each other. There was the woman downstairs, wasn't there, that would send up food. Is it Viv? Viv, yeah. You know, there was the sending up for food, and there was the, and that's the kind of environment that I grew up around, where you know, you'd be giving food to your neighbours, or you'd be sharing things, or if you
were
ran out of tea bags,
short a
like,
bubble too,
like someone lend you something. Do you know what I mean? It was all very much like that. Whereas you know that there's specific communities in these are much more drastic circumstances than, you know, just not having a couple of quid. This is you know, almost end of the world sort of scenario. But you know, as we've seen in the pandemic, those communities become more apparent during those circumstances. Did that make any sense whatsoever?
I think it also goes back to like all of like when I first wrote it, it was more in the distant future, but only because I hadn't really done the world building, and like a lot of novels that I had were like so far in the future. I had every character speak really in such a like Spartan way, like words were rationed to type thing, and I was just like, that's not like, it's not like that. Like if you think about going through the pandemic, like your group chats probably went crazy, like joking all the time, because it's like it's gallows humor, it's like I think that like that's why the love story is really important too, and like people like falling in love and falling into sexual obsession, because like that happens too if it's like the end of the world, or like like of course everything's felt more intensely, like people fall in love on planes at a higher rate because of the like risk of death, like, so I think that that's a really important facet too, like for it to be a socially realistic dystopia.
Absolutely. And like you say, during the pandemic, people immediately, as soon as we were told we couldn't see each other, we're like, right, Zoom. Everybody get Zoom. We're doing a quiz. Everyone I've ever known is going to come and do this quiz.
Exactly. And then I still get like alerts from a house party. I'm like, please, no, I don't want to go in there. I never want to go in there. Leave me alone.
But this is it, because we craved it. It was like as soon as it's took away from you, you crave it, and you see that in Dreamland. You see this kind of like everything is all of these extrinsic factors are pushing you away, but we're clinging to one another. We're clinging to each other, to the things that we know are familiar. I absolutely loved it.
And sex is free. Sorry, but like no I was about to say no one can take that away from you, of course. Like think about like Iran, though, like a million places where particularly gay sex, you know, that's even more taken away from you regularly. But like fundamentally, two adults or young people in like a room alone can do like they can do something that is completely like transformative. Obviously this is like good sex, but bad sex, like but what I mean is like that's another thing that I feel is really important. Not important, I don't know.
It is important. I think it's a sense of intimacy,
life and death, right? Like
life
and death, like that intimacy and that like falling in love, those things are like, you know, the narrator's a 16-year-old girl, like this is a summer which defines everything for her. And I wanted to get those things across too,
which you did beautifully.
You're talking to a woman that had a lockdown baby, so I can tell you about the need for intimacy.
So obviously Dreamland is a dystopian novel, but did you go into it knowing that you were writing a dystopian, and like is that something, a genre that you've always been drawn to, or is it something that grew organically?
I've always like loved it. Have you guys read Zachariah?
No, we've not.
such a good book. Who's that by? Robert C. O'Brien, something like that.
Just getting that note down.
Like nuclear apocalypse, a girl, like she's the valley where she lives is somehow not affected by this like nuclear attack, and her family also go into town and they're gone, and she's all alone. And then she spots like this kind of like a trail of smoke getting closer to her day after day, and she knows that someone's coming, right? And like as he gets closer, it's a guy in like a hazmat suit and like suit, not soup, suit. Like, will he be like her savior or like destroyer, basically? Like books like that completely got into my consciousness. I used to have like this Carrymore bag ready to go at any time. Like it only had a rope, like a tin of tuna or something, and like a spare pair of pants. But like
I love that
kind of like survivalist without any skills at all. But like I think what's interesting about like dystopian novels, they often have a young protagonist, and I think that they are they're appealing to people of all ages, but I think when you're a teenager, there's something about like suddenly being given autonomy, like suddenly having to like fend for yourself is like terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. And I think that's why it would be so kind of like appealing. And lots of my favorites, like How I Live Now by Meg Rosoff too, they're kind of these teenagers who are suddenly taken from the normality, whether that's good or bad, and put into a new like situation. So I was always interested in them, and I did know with this book that I wanted it to be dystopian, partially because my first book's like very semi-autobiographical, and I really wanted to write like fiction, and I was like, so if I write it in the future, can't have happened yet, like I have to kind of make it up, and which was kind of shooting myself in the foot, because the book got a lot better when I brought in more of my own experience and things that like I saw around me. So I did actually like bring in more like known life, and maybe that's the kind of writer I'm best at, doing more like reportage style stuff. But I did always know it was going to be dystopian, and I've always like loved it. I think some literary fiction writers like write dystopian novels having never, I sound like I'm being so rude to so many people, and I actually I'm not subteasing anyone like verbally. I don't even have anyone in mind particularly. Maybe I do, but I do think some people, I think it happens with lots of like genres. You like literary fiction writers think like, oh, I'm going to write like something that's sci-fi, but I won't call it sci-fi, and then like they've never read one before. I don't know, it's just, it can be done, right? I think that they're the first person to ever do anything, and then they do all of the tropes. They haven't done their like research, and it's really it can be frustrating, because I think that like I think genres are kind of ridiculous when they're used to like divide or like lessen things.
Absolutely one thing, I know we're pushing for time, I know you won't let me say as much as I like to, but one thing that I did love was the relationship and the love story between Chance and Frankie, and this glimmer of hope in this ridiculous world that they were in. And without giving too much away, how important was it for you to write such a good love story in the middle of all of this kind of craziness?
Well, I keep on talking about sex so far, so it was important. Well, one, because it's realistic, and two, because it's a gay love story in the book. And I also like, when I was growing up, it's different now completely, but when I was growing up, the only gay stories were like coming out stories, or like, can I come out? Will we do? It should be forbidden. And so like, I really wanted, like, that is not present at all in there. It's going to be difficult for them to be together for like a multitude of other reasons, but it's not that. And that was really important to write. Like, I'm not really interested in the like shame, or like, it's not, I mean, I'm interested in it, of course, like, and I understand it and all of those things, but I didn't want to tell that story. And I'm really, I mean, I'm sure repeating what I said before, but like, I think that falling in love and like falling in sexual obsession are some of the most amazing things that can happen to anyone ever. And I'm always interested, like, what I care about as a writer is trying to like capture in words what things are, whether it's like what the light looks like on the sea, or what a place feels like and looks like, or what a huge feeling like that feels like.
I'm gonna embarrass you now. I just remembered I had a quote which touched on this love story, and I thought it was, your descriptions are just so beautiful on like falling in love and sex and kind of all those things at a young age that feel so kind of like new and special. All these feelings are like, like you said, exciting. I would lie in bed, my back to blue so it didn't feel weird, and try to imagine every inch of you. I had you stand in front of me and turn slowly. I wanted to do things I'd never done with anyone. I wanted to put my whole fist in your mouth. It wasn't soft like people say it's soft. We crashed into each other. I took handfuls of you. We never wanted to stop. And for days that turned into weeks, we didn't. Oh my gosh. And it's just stuff like that. I was like, oh my gosh, like you describe it so accurately.
Yeah.
And it's the whole like wanting to put a whole fist in her mouth. Like it's so like visceral, and it's quite a kind of effect it has on you that you can't quite articulate, but you articulated it. So
So you can. Some people can.
I rewrote a lot of the book when I met my fiance. I rewrote a lot of the book, and I probably put in too much. And one of my friends read it, and she was like, I could maybe take some of it and put it in like a Kindle single, like I think it's like, you know, cut down now to what it like should be. Do you know what was really, really nice? I went to a book club last week, which was a gay book club, LGBTQ plus book club in London, and it was probably half men, half women. And what was really nice is that the like guys found that their like experience of like queer love was really like they were like, we didn't really like some of the other lesbian books, we couldn't really understand it, and all the women were hysterical. I mean, they weren't exactly like as extreme. It felt so nice that like I do think that the love story is gay, and I think women who love women will probably like hopefully like feel something that they've felt represented there. But like I was really interested, and I think all love is universal anyway, but I was really like, I felt so happy that like the gay guys felt that they saw something in their own like love in it too. Like that's what I mean, like a feeling of wanting to put your whole fist in someone's mouth, whether that's like tender or rough or just like whatever that is, like that is a feeling that we have we felt before.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just your descriptions of like even down to sex, like sometimes when sex, we've had this conversation many times like the way sex can be written in novels is sometimes just like it makes my skin hurt, like
it makes my teeth itch,
my skin off because it's so cringy. But the way you wrote it was just like
sexy.
It was sexy, and it was like raw, and I can't even describe it. It was just so well written. I feel like sex is such a hard thing to write.
I think it's like that's so kind of you, because it means I really care about writing it like well, given that it is such a common thing that we all do when we're lucky. But but it's like I think that what can go wrong with it is that people are like, oh, I'm writing sex now, so I must put on my like I must euphemize, and it's like, what? Surely you could just write it as you're writing everything else, because it is. I don't know. I just think that kind of like directness is good. I think Garth Greenwell writes sex really, really well.
Oh, I've still not read him, but you bought me the book.
Very explicit in many ways, but it never feels like, just feels that the same like lyrical yet completely piercing like view that he has on all things just extends through to sex, and like that. It's when people completely change tone, and you're like,
it's just like, it's when you know
on or something, you know, and it's
it's just like, you know, it's coming up, you know what's going to happen, and you feel the author knowing what's going to happen. So everyone kind of goes like, oh no,
not again, stop it.
Then it happens, you know, she touched me here and I touched him there and touched me on my sex, and
when they call it
the sex.
Oh,
what is that? Because I've never seen one. Can you like?
It's so weird. It's like, but no one's ever discussed it. And sure, like people discuss sex when they're having sex with their partner. Like they discuss it in a normal, like, I don't know. They're not like, they wouldn't say, how's your sex feeling? I mean, like, they wouldn't. So why when you're writing? It's like suddenly these great writers just get their like, you know, calligraphy pen and it's very weird, very, very weird.
Now that we have basically just picked your brains, and I've been able to say not all I wanted to say about Dreamland, but a decent amount. What we got you here for originally, other than to wax lyrical about you,
I love the wax lyrical bit.
Tell me more.
Is to get a hold of your 4 top ultimate reading recommendations for our top of your TBR series. I know that my pile is growing by the second. So
I've already given some good tips, actually. I have to say.
This is it. I've already been writing them down. Let's not panic, guys. Let's not panic. So the first book that you chose was We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves by Karen Joy Fowler. Why did you choose this book?
The caveat for this book is do not Google it. Even if you like buy it, don't even read the back. Don't go on Amazon reading it. Like there are so many spoilers for this book that I think sometimes even printed on the book. So just like avoid all of that like whatsoever.
Yeah.
That would be my main like advice. But it's really wonderful. Like the premise is it starts with, I think she's 21. I think her name is Rosemary. Some of these books I've not read in a long time. They're a little bit blurry, but
we forgive.
Strength of emotion is still there.
Yes.
She's like 21. She gets kicked out of college for helping this another woman her age. And this is her beginning the story in the middle. And we realize that she grew up with two parents who are scientists, and her younger sister disappeared at a certain age, and she wants to find out why. I love books with like strong like narrative voices. This one is incredibly funny, precise, vivid. It really is like a kind of, it rollicks along. But then with this book, and again, I can't really say that like too much about it, but it does that like feat of narrative voice, but it really has a kind of broader like meaning. It's like there's a real like ambition to it. And I just finished the book and I was like, yeah, Karen. You've brought the name Karen back into good favor. Like,
a good Karen.
Yeah, no, but it's like it's everything you want to read in a novel, and then it also like goes that step further where it just has this like, first of all, like thesis, a meaning, and like real knowledge, because the fact that her parents were scientists like comes back in. And I was just like blown away by it. So it's an excellent book.
I love that.
I have recommend to people who are looking for a great story.
I have slightly broken your rule of looking it up before read it, but I didn't really find anything out about it at all. I'll be honest, I was a very good girl, but I did find a really funny quote that I was like, and I'm a killer for a quote. So this is just a little excerpt from We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves. When I run the world, librarians will be exempt from tragedy. Even their smallest sorrow will last only for as long as you can take out a book. I was like, yes. All librarians will be exempt.
Really good. Like it's very funny. It really is very funny. And then it's like knock you round the head, meaningful and beautiful.
Yeah.
So,
And it is a novel about family dynamics and the kind of lasting impact that like a parent's choices will have on their children. But are these themes that you enjoy reading about?
Who doesn't enjoy reading about family dynamics? Yeah, like
I love it.
But I just think it's like very well plotted, because you have this sense of mystery, like what happened to the sister? Why is she no longer in their family? But it's one of those things. It's like, I think I'd completely underestimated it, because all I knew about Karen Joy Fowler is the Jane Austen book club, which I probably underestimated too, and is probably like a majestic novel. But sometimes when people are published, not sometimes, everyone knows this, but like you can completely pigeonhole people. And then it's so wonderful when you just like, you pick up a book and you're like, oh, you're a fucking brilliant writer. I can't wait. She just thinks she's had a book out called, it's a one-word title, it's not Byron.
Booth.
Yes. Got the right first letter.
You were close. So close.
That came out really recently, didn't it?
Came out really recently, so I'm gonna that's gonna go on my TBR too.
It's got a really funky front cover.
Oh yeah, it does. It's
it's like funny. Like
I thought it was like historical.
It can be historical and funny. Well. And colourful.
I see historical fiction though when I get scared.
I know you do.
Me too. Me too.
I'm so glad it's not just me.
No. Me too. I really, that's not a part of the like beautiful puzzle of reading that I have found my way into yet, which I guess leaves me lots of majesty ahead.
So your second choice was Flight Behaviour by Barbara Kingsolver. Love that name. But what is it about this book that you love?
So I wanted to pick this book because I've been asked quite a lot recently about like dystopia and cli-fi, and I forgot to mention this book, and like it is superb. And when I was picking my like TBRs for you guys, or ones that I picked to put on other people's, I was trying to think about books that I'd really recommended recently. And my girlfriend, fiance, is she's a climate negotiator. And I've been like, I really think she would love this book. And I think actually everyone would love this book. So it is set in rural Appalachia. How do you pronounce that?
I think it's
Don't ask me.
Appalachia.
Appalachia. I didn't even get it right with the two I did. It was the third one. Appalachia. Okay. It's in like a fictional town called Feathertown. And these names are amazing. So the main character's name is Della Robbia.
Beautiful.
She's like very unhappily married. She's having an affair. And I want to read you, I'm going to read you the opening of the book. So I think it's
amazing.
Like, oh, so good. But she is having this affair. She's basically like destroying her life. And she runs up the hill on the farm where she lives. And she just sees this like blazing, looks like a blazing fire. And it's basically that all of these monarch butterflies have just landed there. And at first it's seen as like, oh, we could make this a tourist attraction, or is it like a godly thing? But it, like, these scientists come and it basically is like these monarch butterflies have changed their flight behavior because of like climate change. It's so good. The writing is like fiercely, like, what I love in good writing is like, what good writing to my mind is like, it's kind of like what I was saying before about the real toads in imaginary gardens with real toads in them, like this kind of a nuggetiness, like a real kind of, you see it, you feel it. There are like proper nouns. You're in the world. Like, I hate vague lyricism, and this is really like precise, and you're just in the world. Yeah, and it's just so well written. I'm going to read you the very open.
Amazing.
I think we've all like had this feeling. A certain feeling comes from throwing your good life away, and it is one part rapture. Well, so it seemed for now to a woman with flame-coloured hair who marched uphill to meet her demise. Innocence was no part of this. She knew her own recklessness and marvelled really at how one hard little flint of thrill could outweigh the pillowy, suffocating aftermath of a long disgrace. Like, that kind of like hard little flint of thrill, like, it just burst into life, you know. And she's like, what do, you know, she's having this affair, which is such a minor thing when she is like, these butterflies, like, in terms of what these butterflies represent. That was, Barbara, if you're listening, I don't know if you are, but I pitched your book really, really badly. But it is, it's a wonder. It's a nice, like, chunky book, and yeah, it's completely compelling. And again, I think, like, you know, that we are all completely beside ourselves. It's a great story, really well written, that goes into like family dynamics and love and affairs, but it's also like deeply knowledgeable and has like this broader meaning. Like, it's not didactic, but it's just like there's a real point to it. Don't get me wrong, I love books without point too, but when you think about the ones that really stay with you, like there's an ambition there, you know, that's like beyond just documenting contemporary life, which I also think is like such a valid and like important thing to do. Yeah, it's when people do both, right? Like, they manage to like capture something of what it is to just have a normal human life, and then something like just takes you outside of the world that you know.
That quote, I think her writing style is that in that specific quote is just showing off.
Well, yeah, I'm a bit furious anyway, because I had a quote and it's not as good as that.
Forget it, chuck it in the bin, it's not happening. I'm also really embarrassed, and I wanted to laugh throughout that, because I've just realised when you were emailing and you said about cli-fi, means climate fiction, doesn't it? Yeah, I didn't take it as that.
What did you think it was? Oh no,
you thought it was to do with the clitoris? My favourite
amazing genre.
Clitoris fiction. I mean,
I was like, why have I never heard of this before?
It does sound like me, but
you know what? If we can just make it one more podcast without you saying clitoris, for goodness sake.
My friend Louis, he's French, and he pronounces it clitoris, which I really respect.
Oh, clitoris.
The clitoris.
Oh, it's brilliant.
I'm using that as a clip.
Oh yeah, please do, because that's actually hysterical.
So what's your favourite clip fiction?
Well, I'd read that Barbara was writing about a place where she came from, and that she knew inherently it was within herself, and obviously with you writing, again back to Dreamland, sorry, with you writing about like Margate and about Planet and places places that you obviously identify with because you live there. Why do you think authors are always sort of pulled back home or pulled back to where they come from?
You know, it's a really interesting one. Like I didn't grow up here. I grew up in London, but we used to come here for holidays. And then my parents moved here like 12, 13 years ago, and I followed them, which I didn't think I would. But I think there can be things which just exist like inside of you. And I think like British beaches, seaside, like always has since I was a kid. And then like it is just like, I don't want to call it an aesthetic because it's not an aesthetic. It's far more than an aesthetic. It's like there's something fundamental about it, like being at the edge of an island, being in these like places which are sometimes so like festive and then sometimes so depressed, like the sensibility of it or whatever, like just makes sense to me, completely like intrigues me. Like when I walk around, I'm always like wanting to take notes, and I'm like, you've written that book, you can't do it again, you go do something else. But there are just like things that just obsess you. And for me that is the British seaside. Long may it rain.
Sorry, you did show us your gorgeous view out the window before, which we're not even slightly jealous of.
It's not my view, it's my godmother. The rental place I had here, my landlady sold it. So yeah, I'm perching here at the moment. But yeah, like there are just places, and I think that's what really comes through too with Flight Behavior. To talk about another novel that isn't Dreamland, even though it upsets me.
Damn it.
Yeah, like it's that nuggetiness too. Like you just know that she knows the place. It's completely vivid, and you have that like, you just feel like you're there. Like so this is what I mean, like I want to reread these books, but I feel like such a sense of essence about them when I think about them. You know, it's like Margaret Atwood, Alias Grace. I read it in Croatia, listening to Strokes album like on repeat. And now, if I ever listen to any of those songs, I'm like wearing a bonnet in that world. And I think some of those big like books that just transport you and they really take you for days, if not a week or 2 weeks, into like this completely other place. Like that is just such that restores my faith in fiction completely. It's just like, wow, someone's just done this with like just words. They didn't need any budget for like that, you know, they've just done it, like, and that's amazing.
So thematically, and I'm going back to Dreamland, you'll be pleased to hear. Thematically, the Flight Behavior is quite similar to Dreamland. Did this come as an inspiration for Dreamland, or you know?
I think sorry, finish your question.
No, go on.
I don't think that I read it as like, I think I must have read it like 10 years ago, and I don't think I read it necessarily as like climate fiction. I don't think I even like, and like with Dreamland, I didn't realize the extent to which it would be climate fiction until like as I was writing it too. And the other thing about that I feel is like every contemporary novel should be is cli-fi, because we are experiencing the changes and effect of climate change like now we're experiencing for the past 20 years. So like I just get worried against that same thing we were talking about before, when like a genre is used to like pigeonhole books. Like everything that's happening now is set against climate change, right? So like it shouldn't be these like, they shouldn't be like segregated, you know, like but it doesn't feel heavy. Like it really is it's just a great story that also like illuminates in a kind of like devastating way. One small, and it's about the butterfly effect too. Like she's obviously not heavy-handed with her like themes, like, but it just works really well as a eulogy to like a changed world.
That is one of the books on your list that I'm like really excited to go away and read. I'm so excited, especially after the quote you just read. I know. I actually
well, let me know. Send me an email.
Yeah, we will.
You'll get full reviews. So moving on to your next choice. It's Hatchet by Gary Paulson. Now, this sounds like a right bit of me.
100%.
Now, Rosie, you might not know this, but our bookends who listen will know this, that I'm a little bit obsessed, slightly obsessed, full-on obsessed with planes and plane crashes. So I read the first 2 lines of this synopsis for this novel and was like, yep, I'm going to read this. Please tell us a little bit more about this book.
Well, this kind of like relates, again, this was someone told me that they were really into like survival stuff recently, and I was like, oh my god, you've got to read this book. And this was another one of the kind of like childhood books that just like got me into like survival stuff, and definitely like lit a fear, lit the kind of power of imagination to so the premise of Hatchet. So first of all, Gary Paulson's an amazing writer. He wrote over 200 books for children and young adults. Like, he had an extraordinary life. He was an alcoholic for a couple of years, and then he managed to like go completely cold turkey. He used to do like dog sled races across like Alaska. Amazing life and amazing books. So I just reread the beginning of Hatchet today, and there's this kid called Brian, basically, and he is sitting in a co-pilot's chair. He's flying between his two parents. His parents have recently got divorced. And the pilot's a bit gruff, and he gives him like a little, like, shows him how to use the plane a little bit. But Brian's just really preoccupied about the fact that his parents are getting divorced. This is done so well, by the way. It's very like punchy, pointless, like feels very modern. It's very simple, but just like so propulsive. Anyway, like the pilot's got this like pain in his arm, and then Brian smells like terrible gas. And then like he basically slowly realizes that pilot's having like an extreme heart attack, basically. So he's like alone in this plane. The pilot dies, and he's got to like use this tiny bit of like information he's been given to like try and land this plane. He's in the middle of nowhere, and all he's got is a hatchet that his mum's given him as like a gift before he leaves to go and see his dad. And he has to survive. And it's just like, it's very unsentimental. It's very, it's just like, I remember as a kid that like him realizing because of the smell that something's like really bad has happened. And it's just like, no punches are pulled, if you know what I mean. Like, it's never gratuitous. It's not like, it's never overwritten, but it just like says really plainly what's happening to this kid. And like, there's a few of these Hatchet books. There's one where he like has to survive through winter. There's another one where he's like saved but then has to come back for a documentary or something. I can't remember like that, but like he's just a very, very, very good writer, and he understands, I think, he understands how to create very real characters and very real compelling scenarios with so few words. Like, if you do read it, like, it's such impeccable storytelling in that way.
It sounds amazing.
Oh my gosh, I know, seriously, I'm like, yes please.
So it is a book about survival and about, I guess, hope during bleak times, but like, what do you think like we can gain from novels like this as readers?
So I think that there can be like a stoicism. Like, I think that people can, like, I think you, in the writing of them, and then in the writing of them, you do think like, okay, what would I do? Like, how would I survive those things? And I think that like, there's like a stoic preparation for bad things happening in either writing about them or reading about them in some way. I think that's part of the appeal. And then there can be a feeling of like, glad that hasn't happened to me, and my life is better than that. But I do think it is about like trying to work out what you'll do in that circumstance. And I play endless like hypothetical situations. Like, she'll be like, okay, someone's just landed in Heathrow with a like terribly contagious disease that's got like a 24-hour thing. You're here. What'd you do? Where'd you go? Who'd you take? Like, you're constantly like playing those games. And I think that there's like, is the combination of the fear you feel, which like gives you kind of like an adrenaline kick, and then like trying in an actually safe scenario to like work out a way to be safe. And I think so like scary in so many ways, like, is probably in conversation with that in some way.
I think as well, like, there's a certain thing about survival novels where you can kind of remove yourself. I mean, you can't anymore, but throughout our lifetime, like, you know, certain things have happened in like other countries, and we've been able to be like, oh god, that's awful. Like, there's that whole thing that people say like, oh, that's really awful, how sad, like, but you're fine. But then obviously the pandemic happened, and none of us kind of could have predicted, or we could have, but you know, we couldn't have predicted, you know, the mass scale and you know, how horrendous that would be for everyone. But I think that's the thing with survival novels now, that you'd probably have a very different reading experience with them
in retrospect.
And
anyone writing one now, I think, would find it harder, because it's a lot of what they would be writing about we've already had to do in a way. You know?
It sounds like our brains are like
buffering.
to land a plane with a dying man in it into a forest.
No thanks.
But, you know what? I'm so furious that I've not had the chance.
Oh my gosh, that's like Lydia's dream scenario.
But dream scenario is water landing. Get out.
It's not a water landing, I'm afraid.
I'm sad about that.
Maybe anyway, the The great thing about recommending books I haven't read for a long time is that it's really making me want to read them again.
Yes. And that is what we are here for.
We aim to please.
And I'm betting right now a load of people are ordering these books. So this is, I mean, I think it's your only YA choice out of the 4. Do you read a lot of YA? Is it something that you enjoy reading? Because I know it's something that I've got really into the past year. I was just wondering, is it something that you read often, or?
I definitely wouldn't not read a YA book at all. I haven't read one recently. I think the ones that stay with me, I did read when I was younger, and then I've reread them with adult eyes and been this is just as amazing.
Yeah.
I think the best books are crossovery, and the best books are just great stories that are written in quite simple ways. That's my aesthetic anyway. But yeah, I do think particularly, well, the next book too, actually, moving on, is also it is, again, I'd say it's a crossover book, because it's Dodie Smith of 101 Dalmatians, I Capture the Castle, and that too, it's definitely completely enjoyable to read as an adult, but you can definitely read it as a teenager, even probably as a child. It's definitely PG 12 tops, and that's that's completely different from the other books. Have you guys ever read that?
No, but we did want to know why you chose that.
Look at that segue.
Well, I chose that because my girlfriend, who I mention all the time in this, she was looking for a kind of comforting read, she's on a big work trip right now, and I was like, oh, you have to read this. And I was reading the introduction of it before I felt jealous of her that she was reading it for the first time. And I've read it a couple of times through my life. I read it most recently, I think my dad and I were in a charity shop, and I saw a copy, and I already felt fondness to it, and I opened it and I read the first line again, and I was like, oh man, this is so good. So I bought it, and then just had this delicious day reading it. So it does really just make me think of comfort, and it's a really interesting story. So Dodie Smith was a playwright, and she had a very successful playwriting career, and she got stuck. She's British English, and she got stuck in the US during the Second World War, and she wrote this in California, I think, but it's the most it really is clearly this nostalgia infused love letter to a place that she can't be in, and it's based on a building that she used to see in her childhood. I do think, I haven't actually got it up, I'm going to find it, because I do think it's really worth reading the opening line of that, because you just get a real sense of the narrator, who just bursts into being this precocious funny
favorite kind of characters.
It starts, I write this sitting in the kitchen sink. That is, my feet are in it. The rest of me is on the draining board, which I have padded with our dog's blanket and the tea cozy. I can't say that I'm really comfortable, and there is a depressing smell of carbolic soap, but this is the only part of the kitchen where there is any daylight left. And I have found that sitting in a place where you have never sat before can be inspiring. I wrote my very best poem while sitting on the hen house, though even that isn't a very good poem. I've decided my poetry is so bad that I mustn't write any more of it. And it's just
I love that.
It's just so vivid. It feels very the voice feels very fresh and modern, even though scenario is very it's mannered in this country house. It feels, and then the narrative kind of plays with Austenian style themes of will the daughters find the daughters find brides, that's how I do it, but will the daughters find husbands. It's very, very charming and clearly written with love and sincerity, and it's a really lovely book.
It sounds beautiful.
I love that, honestly. That's another one. There you go, guys, add that to your list. And it is set in 1934, and again, with it being sort of historical now, I think you could call it historical from where we're sat now. And we talked a little bit about how Hannah tends to balk at the idea.
Would this count as a historical novel to you?
I don't know. I don't think it would, but I think that with it being set in that period, I think that
it doesn't feel super modern, does it?
No, it's one of those books where I think that don't be put off.
That's a very good question, actually. I don't know where I'd draw the line with historical fiction.
I think if it's me, I'm thinking roughs that.
Yes.
But then I wouldn't. But I probably wouldn't read. I wouldn't read something I definitely would and have, but like I feel less inclination to things. But then, like, you know, there's like Howard to M. There's so many wonderful novels of that period. I think I think for me, historical fiction feels like like maybe 1700s and 1600s, like that sort of time. But yeah, this does feel really like fleet-footed and modern. Like it doesn't feel, because that's the other thing too. Like I love Sally Rooney. I think she's wonderful, but I think, like, you know, people can be like, it's the first kind of like, as if it's like the first fresh female voice, and it's like there are so many extraordinary examples, like Françoise Sagan, or like I was reading, I mean, like Bonjour, Tristesse, an amazing book, but I read like another one of hers recently called A Certain Smile, and like it's just, if you want like Rooney style like insouciance, like it's all there. And they say, like, I'm not saying like anything negative about her at all. I don't think she claims to be pioneering anyway, and she has definitely her own like style and verve and stuff. But I do think that like there's, particularly if you don't read a lot of like novels which aren't contemporary, it feels like this amazing like kind of like glittery glint when you feel like modernity or connection to something, to like a voice that was, you know, she wrote it in 45, but like that's coming up to 80 years ago. Like when you feel like, oh, you're funny and sparky and like just the same, like that feels really like, it feels so exciting.
And I think Rooney herself, she's spoken about how it's kind of like everyone started to, again, like we talk about pigeonholing, about kind of saying, well, she's the voice of a generation. And how even Sally Rooney herself was like, no, I'm not. I just write books, and I write these books for me, you know. And I think that
like, even going back to that line though, like the idea that Lena Dunham gets skewered for that, like the whole point in that episode is that she's like, I'm the voice of my generation. She's like, then she says herself in character, a voice in a generation. Like
it's the context.
So self-aware, and then still like flatten it to this like claim that like no one's done that, because no one is, you know, anyone who's actually like writing really good, interesting stuff has the self-awareness that they're like a part of. I mean, it's just, people are ridiculous about any women who have success in that way.
Absolutely.
My other question was actually referencing a quote about I Capture the Castle. So I found this article on Vox that's titled Why I Capture the Castle Has Gained a Secret Cult of Book Lovers. And it says, every time I meet someone who also loves I Capture the Castle, writes Jenny Han in her foreword to the new edition of Dodie Smith's 1948 classic, I know we must be kindred spirits. Once you read it, you fall in love with it, and from then on, you're part of a secret club, self-selecting and wildly enthusiastic. So I guess my question would be...
the club existed, but that's cool to know.
You are part of the club.
You're part of the club,
without even knowing.
So I was going to ask you, why do you think it has gained a secret cult following? But I mean, you didn't know it had one. So surprise, you're part of a secret cult.
It's not that I was like, wow, I'm the only person who's discovered this novel. Like, completely not the case. I was like, did this podcast with a wonderful friend of mine called Catherine Williams, and it's the Book Off podcast, and you have to like.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, we love Book Off.
And I picked World War Z, which is a great underrated book. Even, you know, it's underrated despite the fact it was turned into a film with Brad Pitt. And she picked I Capture the Castle, and I wanted to be like, well, like I would side with you, you know. Like, so I do. People do really love the book. I do, like the word charming, but it's so charming. Like, and I think, you know, a lot of the books I've recommended do like take you straight into like, they're all great stories, but the first three are definitely like, well, Hatchet will like punch you in the guts. The others are like, you know, they're definitely grueling as well as entertaining in certain ways. And this is like bittersweet, charming. Like it feels like a time capsule that still like feels relevant today. Well, not relevant, I don't mean like kind of thematically relevant, I just mean like it doesn't, the freshness of it, like the voice of it feels like, you know, you're like speaking through time. Like it just is like.
I was going to ask which of the 4 books might be your favourite, but I think you've just answered that.
I don't know, you know, like I'd be like immensely proud and just retire if I'd written like any of them.
Please don't retire.
Please don't.
I think I will. That's the thing. Like
Sophie's choice.
if I Catch the Castle's got a cult following, I've always wanted to run a cult. So
Now she's
Rosa, we now crown you head of the cult.
yeah, but like Harry Paulson sold 35 million copies. So
That's true. 35 million and one.
Yeah.
So I know that these 4 choices are absolutely amazing, and thank you for giving them to us. Have you got any honourable mentions? I mean, I know you sent us a list. She sent us a list, Bookends. We asked for 4. She sent a list because she loves it. And we panicked. We were like, these are all brilliant. But do you have any honourable mentions? Anything that springs to mind that you think you might have missed?
I think if anyone's like listening to this because they love dystopian books, or like they read Dreamland and they liked it, I think that The Dog Stars is an excellent book. I also really recommend. I have been on like a big Doris Lessing bent recently. I think Mara and Dan. I haven't read it for like 10 years, but that was a really formative. Maybe I haven't even read it for 15 years. Maybe I've got to the age where I haven't read it for 20 years. It might be the age where I haven't read it for 20 years, but that's a really amazing far future book where a brother and a sister are making their we're going through an ice age, and a brother and a sister are making their way through Africa, which is called Ifrique, I think, in the book. But that's like a huge feat of world building. Shout out for my own mother's book, The Ice People. My mum, Maggie Gee, is like she's an amazing novelist. I think she published 18 novels at this stage, but
wow,
she's always been like ahead of the game. And we both have books that are set in like Margate, Ramsgate, that were out in the same couple of years, and people were kind of like, hers came out after mine. I was like, oh, but she's done everything before me. Like she wrote a Margate novel before me, and like the Ice People, which is also set in an ice age, is like one of the first kind of climate fiction books. She wrote it in, I think it came out in 1999, really ahead of its time. Amazing research, and she's just a wonderful novelist, and I'm having dinner with her tonight because she's in Ramsgate. So that's a nepotistic shout out for my own mother.
We're gonna absolutely,
we're here for the mother. Definitely.
So thank you so much for doing this episode of A Pair of Bookends, Rosa. We've absolutely loved speaking to you. Before we let you go, we do, even though we've absolutely dragged every recommendation possible, we do like to finish on cultural recommendations. Is there anything that you've been watching, listening, anything recently?
So I watched 6 episodes of the 8 of The Bear last night, which is so good. Have you guys seen it?
No, I've not seen it.
What's it on?
Disney, and I had to like get a month long to watch. No regrets. It is like so fast paced and like punchy, and just like the acting is amazing. The script is really, really good. I completely love that. I'm a big I think Sam Levinson, what he's done with Euphoria is like amazing. Closer to home. Like I love Feel Good. I love
Feel Good is so good. I haven't watched the latest season though, so no spoilers.
No, it's like, and I think the second season is even better.
And it's set in Manchester.
Yeah,
I love In My Skin. I think that's absolutely wonderful too. I think there's like amazing like female writing, well, female and male, but like there's such extraordinary writing on TV, and that feels like so exciting.
Yeah, 100%. Just before we let you go, is there anything that you're working on at the moment that our listeners can keep an eye out for? Please say yes, please.
So my third book is being written with the same process that I described earlier, aka
difficulty.
Hopefully we'll get there in the end, and it's called My Only Boy, and it's about a lesbian and a gay man who fall in love like accidentally, and what it's like to kind of return to like heteronormativity after forming your kind of identity in a certain way. But one of the things that's really interesting to me about it too is like I'm really not done with the Dreamland universe, and so this is kind of like it operates like it's within the same universe in slightly prequel-esque. So it takes place in like London, has like we meet like one or two of the characters from Dreamland, but it really is set. It's set like I wanted to kind of write the even closer future political like landscape that builds up to that. So
amazing.
It's like a contemporary, more contemporary novel, but like that in what we're living, like economic recession and a kind of like absolute obliteration of political norms. So
music to my ears, Rosa.
Music to my ears.
And Lydia is going to kill me, but are there any plans to adapt Dreamland?
It's all about the
I need to know.
adaptations.
There
allowed to
are,
say?
yeah. I'm not allowed to. I'm not particularly allowed to talk about it, but
Okay.
That's okay. That's all we need to know. We just
That's all we
need
need
to
to
know
know.
that a seed has been planted.
But I will be, as we are actors, I will be
Don't forget us.
keeping an eye out for auditions.
faces are.
I'll send you my headshot.
But what would,
Amazing.
what characters would you? What would be your?
Stop, that is the best question.
No, don't.
I would actually love to play Chance, but I don't know if I'm
You're
a
old.
bit too old for
You are
Chance.
old.
I look young,
Not that
but
young.
not that young. No. I don't know. That's difficult.
I'd probably do
Don't
that.
tell me there's not a place for me in the adaptation,
No,
because I
don't.
don't want to think about that right now.
You can add in new characters. You can pitch the line.
Rosa, are you telling me that you're going to write us into your script? I think you are. I think
Gotta
you
go.
are.
The connection is really it's breaking.
And on that note,
And on that
thank you
note.
so much, Rosa. This has been amazing.
Okay.
This is like genuinely the longest conversation we've had
I know.
so far. I'm sorry.
talking.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Not at all. I've enjoyed it so much. I've enjoyed
But
it.
where can our listeners find you quickly on
My
socials?
address?
Not your address.
Full
Not your
address,
address.
postcode.
Yeah, I'm not very active on social media, but I am present there, and I do love. It's like, yeah, I don't post that much, but I do love to like hear from people, as long as it's abusive,
Nice
non-
things. So is it at Rosa Rankin-Gee? Is that
Yeah, exactly.
perfect? Amazing. Oh well, thank you so much, Rosa. It's been
My
an absolute
absolute pleasure. Thank you, guys.
amazing. Thank you.
Thank
And, listeners, please do rate, review, and subscribe, as it helps to boost us in the charts. Please go give Rosa a follow. And if you've not already read Dreamland, we're going to link to the book in the show notes. If you've not already read it, what are you doing? Go and buy it right now.
Read it.
Go and buy it right now, and hopefully we have boosted your TBR with these amazing recommendations. So thank you so much again, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.